afternoon and good morning, everyone. My name is Lindsay Fauntleroy. I'm the author of In Our Element, and I am so excited to be here to talk to you about the use of flower essences for emotional and spiritual wellness. What I'm hoping to do today is help demystify what flower essences are and how they fit into creating a new paradigm for emotional and spiritual wellness. So what are flower essences? Let's just start there with the basics. So a lot of times, and I've been doing this work for almost 2 decades, oftentimes when I say flower essences, folks assume that I'm talking about essential oils. So just as a point of clarity, essential oils are not flower essences. Essential oils are wonderful. They're used in aromatherapy. You can get a nice lavender oil or sandalwood or patchouli, and you work with essential oils externally. Flower essences, on the other hand, are closer to being herbal supplements that are taken internally. So we see here, the typical dose of a flower essence is a few drops under the tongue 4 times a day, or as needed for emotional stress and inner growth. Coming back to an idea that wellness includes tending to the hopes, dreams, desires, and frustrations of the soul, that when we just pay attention to our body, we're missing the mark in terms of true wellness. And also, we just pay attention to our spiritual insights, that we're also not quite hitting the mark. And flower essences and soul medicine, as I discussed it in my book, is that how do we look at what's going on in our hearts, our dreams, how we're living on purpose, how we're stepping into our vision. All of those things are things that we can work with what I call soul medicine. If we look into the field of Black psychology, we see Nayam Akbar, who's one of the pioneers, who has talked about how ancient people used ancestrally, they used the cycles of nature to understand what was transforming and happening on a spiritual level, so that these forces of nature became metaphors, became signals, became symbols of an inner process that we couldn't see because it was happening in the world of the invisible. We can't see necessarily what's going on in our mind or in our heart, but when we look to nature, we can understand these cycles of inner growth and inner transformation. So some of the concepts that come out of this worldview are that mind and body are not separate. They do exist on a continuum, but what you do to the mind is reflected in the body, and what you do to the body is reflected in the mind. That illness can be physical, mental, emotional, or circumstantial, right? So oftentimes we think about being sick physically, or even, a growing conversation about mental and emotional health. But in this medicine, our circumstances are also indicative of how life force and chi are flowing for us. So what I say in my practice is it's money and honey that tend to bring people into my work, money being their career or how they're living into their purpose or goals, and honey being, of course, the relationships and things that make our life sweet. So if there's a blockage in any of those areas, that we can turn to this wisdom of nature, we can turn to flower essences to support us in healing. In this philosophy, all healing is spiritual, and nature is our ally in connecting to the spirit. So when we're working with flower essence therapy, we are extracting the intelligence and the intention represented by a flower and bringing that intelligence into our being. And it's really beautiful to imagine that every plant that we pass has something that it knows, has something that it can teach humanity about how to be better humans, how to be more in alignment, how to be more in the flow of the soul of the world, or the anima mundi, instead of the separation that we experience that leads to disease, that leads to depression, that leads to anxiety. So we turn to flower essences for 3 major areas. The first is for unresolved emotions. So anytime we have an emotion that is stuck or is not moving fluidly, it's not that we should suppress our emotions or even try to feel better. It's the idea that every emotion is moving our life force in a particular direction. And so we want to learn from those messages as opposed to suppressing them or letting them just spill out all over the place. And you may know someone in your life who is, maybe they're going through a sad period and they can't express any joy. So we would want to work on that emotion. Someone who is chronically angry or perpetually angry, that everything seems to be a trigger. Those unresolved emotions, those deeper layers of emotions, are things that flower essences are really excellent at addressing. The next area of flower essence work is for mental blocks, or I like to call them the mental shenanigans. So whenever we're having problems with focus, concentration, if we have negative thoughts that are kind of popping up spontaneously, keeping us from seeing our true selves and keeping us from being in a place of gratitude, if we're unable to make decisions, if we're hypercritical, unable to find solutions, all of those things are going to point us to flower essence work. There's some beautiful flower essences that address all of those mental hiccups that we might experience. And then the last and really most exciting, I believe, area of flower essence work is this aspect called soul evolution. So soul evolution means that there are aspects of our personality that are like threads in the tapestry of our life, right? So if I have issues of trust, if I have issues of abandonment or rejection, those are going to show up in nearly every aspect of my being. It's going to show up when I'm buying groceries. It's going to show up when I'm going after career. It's going to show up in my parenting. And so the flower essences are a really great ally for those who are committed to personal growth, committed to undoing and untangling the wounds and the life experiences that keep us from activating our truest potential, and to help us unravel those things that are getting in the way of our greatness, our connection, and our community. So when we're working with flower essences, oftentimes we think about this iceberg as a metaphor for the mind. And I think it's a really perfect way to think about flower essences, because at the top of the iceberg, we see what is often referred to as a conscious mind, or what we know intellectually, what we know through our senses. And then down here, there's all of this material that's running the show. We often refer to this as the subconscious mind. And so this is the field of action of flower essences. It's really working to help us understand our beliefs, help us to understand our perceptions, and help us to understand the things that are blocking us from truth and from light, and so that we can begin to shapeshift. I use this example to say that our experience is really colored by our interpretation, the energy we put behind what we perceive, how we respond to what happens. All of those work together to create our manifested experience. And so the flower essences are working in this subconscious, under the ground matter that we're not even often consciously aware of. And they bring those things to the surface so that we can examine them, explore them, determine if they're true, determine if they're in alignment, and then consciously make new choices. So what happens when you're working with flower essences? The first thing that you want to do is keep a keen and a watchful eye for internal changes and external expressions, because they are subtle yet profound. So if we're going about the busyness of our lives, we're not going to necessarily notice that the flower essence is really working its magic. The change happens in the context of what we're working on. And so you'll see that in a moment. And it really is an invitation to be still enough and present enough to our own inner dynamics to see these wonderful changes that happen within and then reflect in the outer world. So one of the first things that you'll notice when working with flower essences, sometimes we have these vivid dreams, these dreams that come as messages from the soul, these dreams that give us insight into our inner workings. And working with a flower essence practitioner in some cases can help you to uncode and decipher the language of your dreams and how your dreams are uniquely speaking to you. What comes up often with flower essences are these sudden insights, this awareness or this understanding of why we do what we do. Again, like I said, it's bringing this subconscious material to the surface. So we might realize when working with a flower essence that, oh, I'm being guarded or I'm being defensive, and this is why everyone is reacting to me this way. Or I really actually am excited about this project that I'm working on, and that's why I can't put it down. That's why I'm staying up at night. It's giving us some insight into that subconscious material that we might not have had access to before. Then there are those aha moments where we're like, oh, that's how I can solve that problem. So my favorite example, I have a flower essence in my collection called Embodied Light. And that flower essence helps people to work on their health regimen and their healing regimen. So oftentimes what happens with that flower essence is that someone will start working with that essence and they're like, oh, I know when I can go to the gym, or this is the dietary regimen I should follow. And it just kind of clicks into place. So those epiphanies, those ahas, those are the things that I really enjoy hearing from my clients of how the flower essences are showing up for them. Relationship shifts are really common when we work with flower essences, which is great because, like I said, money and honey. And so with the relationship shifts, we find ourselves organically and authentically responding to triggers differently. So if I am working with a flower essence, one of my flower essences is called Open, and it works with our patterns of abandonment and vulnerability. And so as we're working with the flower essence, we might notice that we are often responding from a place of fear in our relationships, fear of rejection, and that's keeping us from showing up fully. So the way the flower essence might work is that we might find ourselves feeling less afraid to be vulnerable and feeling by extension closer in our relationships because something in our heart space is allowing us to be seen. And we might not even notice it. It might be our partners or our friends or our business allies, our colleagues that point out that we're doing something different, that we're speaking out, that we're biting our tongue, that we're holding back, that we're talking more kindly, whatever it is that the flower essence is doing. Will show up in our relationships as they shift and change around us. And lastly, I love that flower essences open us, if we're paying attention, to coincidences and synchronicity, those unexpected moments that show up. It's like the doors are open for us. And those synchronistic moments, being in the right place at the right time, making that call because it feels like the right time to make that call, that kind of alignment that comes when we're working with flower essences, we start to see those coincidences and we start to experience ourselves as part of that shared life force, that shared breath, that shared consciousness that we want to be in alignment with. So I always tell folks when they're working with flower essences, this quote that comes from Neil Donald Walsh's book, Conversations with God, when he asked God, how will I know you're talking to me? And I say that this is kind of the same way that the flower essences talk to us. Be on the lookout. The words to the next song you hear, the information in the next article you read, the storyline of the next movie you watch, the chance utterance of the next person you meet, or the next whisper of the river, the ocean, the next breeze that crosses your ear. The flower essences bring us into a place of being able to hear and to know and be present to a natural world that is constantly communicating to us and in support of us reaching our highest destiny. I am super excited. My book, In Our Element, where I talk about specific flower essences to work with, as well as the 5 elements and how to align with those rhythms and pulses and cycles of the natural world, comes out on August 8th. It is available for pre-order now in all the places and spaces that you buy books. And I hope that you will pick it up, enjoy it, and share it and reach out to me and share what you discover.